Look at the architecture from the turn of the 20th century, and you will see a world dripping in ornate stone and neo-Gothic spires. Fast forward just a few decades, and those intricate carvings were swapped out for unyielding blocks of raw, gray concrete. The 20th century switched on like a machine. Electricity, mass production, and the automobile arrived with incredible speed. But this rapid industrialization caused a severe housing crisis. Factories pulled thousands of workers into the cities, resulting in overcrowded, unsanitary living conditions that starkly contrasted with the shiny promise of the modern age. Meanwhile, architects were caught in an identity crisis. They had access to powerful new materials like reinforced concrete and steel, but they were still dressing their buildings to look like medieval cathedrals or Roman temples. They were stuffing modern steel skeletons inside fake historical costumes. The American architect Louis Sullivan offered a blunt solution to this disconnect. He declared that form follows function. A building should clearly express its purpose and its underlying structure. Gluing classical columns onto a factory or an office building was dishonest. Architecture needed to embrace the truth of its materials. This sparked a radical idea. Architects wondered if they could engineer a better society using the exact same principles that built the factory line. But treating housing as a mathematical equation introduces a profound tension. Can the cold, calculating efficiency of the machine actually solve the desperate, messy reality of human life? The answer began to take shape in Germany. In 1919, Walter Gropius founded the Bauhaus, an experimental school with a specific mission. He wanted to eliminate the traditional divide between the artist and the craftsman and unite high art directly with industrial mass production. To achieve this, the Bauhaus stripped away all hysterical ornament. They rebuilt design from the ground up using fundamental geometric abstractions, circles, squares, and straight lines, often utilizing stark primary colors. Designers applied these same rules to everyday domestic objects. Figures like Marcel Breuer took industrial materials, like the tubular steel typically used for bicycles, and bent them into sleek, functional furniture meant for the modern living room. The Bauhaus was engineering a highly scalable system. By prioritizing function and mass production over expensive, slow artisan labor, they were attempting to democratize design. The goal was to make well-crafted, rational objects accessible to the general public. By the 1930s, these ideas had spread globally, evolving into what became known as the International style. It was defined by its strict minimalism and its intentional lack of regional flavor. A glass and steel box could be dropped into New York, Berlin, or Tokyo and look exactly the same. The Swiss-French architect Le Corbusier pushed this mechanical logic to its limit. He famously declared that a house should operate purely as a machine for living in. Le Corbusier broke human habitation down into a set of mathematical rules. Instead of thick, load-bearing walls, he used a structural grid of pilotis, support pillars that lifted the bulk of the building off the ground and into the air. Because these internal pillars carried the structural weight, the exterior walls were freed up entirely. This allowed for open, flexible floor plans and continuous ribbon windows of glass that wrapped around the facade, flooding the interior with natural light. The physical culmination of these rules is the Villa Savoy, completed in 1931. It stands as a strict manifesto of modernist living, hovering above the landscape like a precision-engineered spacecraft. Architecture had become a standardized, replicable formula. The implication was enormous. If you could perfectly engineer a single house, a government could deploy that same formula across entire continents to engineer a better society. That theoretical ambition slammed into reality after World War II. Industrial cities across Europe were heavily bombed, and millions of displaced people desperately needed homes. The modernist machine had to scale up drastically to meet the moment. The solution was brutalism. The term derives from the French phrase béton brut, meaning raw concrete. Architects chose this material for its complete honesty, its speed of construction, and its durability. They poured it into massive wooden molds, leaving the rough, textured surface exposed for the world to see. These projects were wildly ambitious. Architects designed massive, towering housing estates meant to act as self-contained vertical cities. They included built-in shops, communal recreation spaces, and broad external walkways designed to function as literal streets in the sky. Brutalist megastructures represented the peak of the modernist utopian dream. They were a unified attempt by state governments and architects to cure urban inequality and overcrowding through rugged materials and mass efficiency. But treating a building like a machine eventually exposes a fatal flaw. The architects drafted the perfect mathematical blueprints, but they failed to account for the unpredictable, complex nature of the human beings actually living inside. Over time, the physical and social realities of these megastructures degraded. Many estates suffered from a severe lack of maintenance and civic neglect. The sprawling concrete corridors created social isolation, while the massive scale of the buildings felt oppressive and alienating to the residents. The universal logic of the international style also took a psychological toll. Because the architecture was deliberately placeless, it ignored local cultures, historical continuity, and regional climates. People felt entirely disconnected from their own environments. By the 1970s, architects like Robert Venturi rebelled against this rigid minimalism. They kicked off the postmodern movement, demanding that architecture return to historical symbolism, contradiction, and visual warmth. Social housing is a deeply complex human challenge, not a simple engineering puzzle. Raw structural capacity and standardized floor plans cannot substitute for genuine community engagement and daily livability. Yet, modernism cannot be dismissed as a total failure. Its technological triumphs remain the foundation of how we build today. The open floor plan, the integration of steel and glass, and the techniques of prefabrication are completely embedded in modern construction. Moreover, its core ambition, the conviction that urban design has a clear social responsibility to improve lives, still drives affordable housing initiatives and sustainable city planning across the globe. Modernism proved that architecture must boldly harness technology to move forward. But it also leaves behind a permanent warning. A precision-engineered machine can build a structure. It takes human empathy, context, and care to turn that structure into a home.